This is a unique video for my channel. I'd like to discuss an ongoing problem that keeps coming up in my discussions with people. There are some massive Facebook groups out there for us polar warriors. I am so grateful for the admins and people who donate so much time to provide a free resource like this. I'm friends with many of them, and they've been a big part of helping the polar warrior community grow. These communities provide almost 24-hour support for people on social media. There's usually always someone awake and online at all hours of the day. Facebook, Google, and YouTube are where everyone probably goes to learn about anything, right? I first went to Google and YouTube when I was diagnosed to learn about it, and then I went to social media to meet with others and possibly get some support. I'm sure there's many of you that followed the same path. I wanted to make sure I shared all of that first because I full-heartedly support anyone and any resource that helps people not feel so alone. At the same time, I'm seeing a subtle yet very negative impact that these groups are having, especially on those who are newly diagnosed. Not all the groups, of course. It's usually the largest ones that are general, all-around bipolar groups. The smaller ones that are geared towards a specific aspect, like bipolar spouse support or even my Patreon community, tend to be more intimate and on point with the discussions. Now, my goal in making this video is not to rip on Facebook groups. Like I said, there's some really good ones out there. My goal is to encourage people to remember that they are representatives and ambassadors for bipolar disorder. What we say and do online impacts all of us and how the world sees us. Many stereotypes and stigmas out there are fueled by our actions when we aren't stable. Those of us seeking treatment are typically kind, loving, and considerate people the majority of the time. Yet many of these social media groups capture the ugly sides of the illness. If that's all someone sees when they come to a group with 20,000 members, they could very well assume that we're all like that, when in reality, it's just a few who are very unwell. When I first started looking for support, I was so disappointed to find that the majority of posts in the larger online bipolar groups were almost toxically negative. Reading the posts didn't make me feel like I got some help, support, or education in any way. They were downright depressing and sometimes a massive trigger when I needed a little bit of light in my life. They reminded me of the darker sides of my illness and made me feel almost hopeless because of how few solutions there were being offered, if any. I'm not talking about people sharing their honest experience or asking for advice on a public forum. That's what these groups are there for. It's the over-the-top, almost vicious posts when people aren't well. I've seen this negativity directed at total strangers who are there to learn and offer support. Everyone experiences bipolar disorder differently, so if someone newly diagnosed reads these horrible stories, they may assume that this is what they have to look forward to with their diagnosis. Many of the negative posts were written under the veil of being symptomatic, untreated, or even intoxicated. I don't see my life or the world in the same way when I'm not well. In fact, I've learned to stay the hell away from my keyboard when I'm not well. I've posted comments or messaged friends when I'm symptomatic and felt so embarrassed to read them later. This doesn't mean that the feelings weren't real at the time. It's just not how I typically experience the majority of my life. This is also why so many of these threads end up being deleted from the groups once the person's symptoms have subsided. With online groups and even peer support, it doesn't really work unless you give as much as you're receiving. How much time have you spent in the groups when you're well, offering support to others? That's a sobering thought, isn't it? Just imagine how overwhelmed the admins of these groups feel, especially when they're often the only ones offering support on a consistent basis. If I didn't enjoy helping others so much, it would probably really get to me too. Even counselors have to have their own counselors. If everyone in a group needs support, but no one is offering it back, it's like the blind leading the blind. If members typically participate in these groups when they're struggling, we also see a lot of people who aren't well offering advice to others. I also see a lot of Quote, "I'm so sorry you're struggling. You're in my thoughts and prayers. Hang in there." I've said these things myself, and I know this is our honest attempt to offer support, but when overused phrases like this come from a complete stranger, it's just not the same. It means a lot more when I hear them from someone who truly knows me. In online groups, it would help me so much more if someone also said, "I went through that, and here's what helped me." Whether their advice is helpful or not, it's still way more sincere. Or, "I don't know how to help with that issue, but here's an article or a video I found with some info about it." It only takes a second to do a search for something that might help someone. Just food for thought. Even "hang in there" is still a heck of a lot better than "yeah, my life totally sucks too and everything is shit." Now, don't be too hard on yourself after hearing all this. Most of you probably never even thought about groups from this kind of perspective. I didn't until I ran one myself. What I see happening so much is what I call the emotional drive-by, and I have a video that talks about this. People will come to the groups when they're at their worst, dump all of it on the community, and then disappear until the next time life falls apart. I have lost so many friends doing this. There's a huge difference between asking for support and sharing your experiences versus having a pity party where everyone just talks about how much life sucks. Misery loves company, but that doesn't solve anything. It's a huge outlet for many people, but a very non-constructive one. It's wonderful to know that you're not the only one suffering. I totally get that, but not at the expense of other people's emotional health. After the emotional drive-by, there's not much follow-up on what actually helped these people feel better or an update on how they're doing now. They just forget about the group until they need an outlet again. My last important point relates to crisis situations. Peer support groups are not qualified or equipped to handle a crisis like suicide. That's why they're called support groups and not crisis intervention groups. It literally takes less time to call a trained professional at a 24-hour suicide hotline than it does to log in, go to a group, and write a post on Facebook. Think about that, especially if you have the hotline on speed dial like I do. Whether you're truly suicidal or just seeking community reaction or feedback, either way, online groups is not the place for that. I've seen so many posts where people say they're suicidal, literally considering doing it, or flat out post that they are going to do it. I take this very seriously, and as a self-mandated reporter, I report those posts to law enforcement. 1 in 5 of us don't survive this illness. 1 in 5. Do you get how serious that is? When someone posts about suicidal thoughts, this is the most crucial, delicate, and dangerous time for those with mental illness. It's the end of the line for us. This is where you need to be on your way to a hospital or a doctor's office, not hanging out at 2 a.m. in a Facebook group. If someone in my community says that they're considering suicide, police are going to be showing up at their door or place of work within the hour. I don't screw around when it comes to mentioning suicide. Also, keep in mind that posts like this are a massive unhealthy trigger for other members, even with those cute little trigger warnings that people post. Mental illness runs in the family, so chances are someone in the group is going to have fresh wounds from losing someone. There are countless other places where discussing suicide is more appropriate, like a hotline, hospital, counselor, or a doctor. Now, there are times where I've seen posts that talk about someone's attempt and how they got the help they needed, but their desired outcome is usually just to raise awareness. That's completely different. If it's a general bipolar-related support group, just think twice before you post there about a crisis situation. This is out of respect for you getting the best care that you need and out of respect for the trauma that others might carry in that group. Here's an interesting thought. The human body can't always tell the difference between the stimulation it gets from being totally upset versus when we're totally excited and happy. Both release the same biochemicals that enhance our emotional responses. People who have way more drama in their life than happiness can literally become addicted to the rush of conflict without even realizing it. Being upset might be the only time that they feel alive or excited, even if it's very unhealthy. You ever meet couples that just love to fight all the time, where they're aware that they do it but have no desire to change? Think about that. What kind of rush do you get when you do an emotional drive-by? My entire channel came about because I was so frustrated that I couldn't find actual solutions and tools on YouTube that I could start using right now to help ease my suffering. Most of the videos, forums, and groups I found were fueling stations for emotional drive-bys. Not all of them, of course, but probably a large majority. If you want to find some really good solution-based resources, look for professional organizations like NAMI, the International Bipolar Foundation, Bipolar Hope Magazine, even my channel, which has become the largest online video support community for bipolar disorder. If you read the articles and even the discussions that people post on professionally run forums, it's a much higher caliber and constructive and inspiring source of solution-based information. Professional organizations provide professional information. Social media is, well, social media. I'd love to hear some of your constructive thoughts or experiences with online support groups in the comments below. This is a little more controversial of a topic than my typical videos, but I've had enough people express concerns that it was worth making the time to talk about it. Please know that I do not allow link spamming on my channel. If there's a resource that you'd like to share, post a single comment and it'll be held by YouTube until I approve it. I hope all of you have a peaceful week, and I'm always available if you want to connect with me personally. There's a link in my video descriptions where you can contact me directly, as well as access a collection of videos that I don't post on YouTube. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I hope you'll stop by the channel again soon. Stay well.